Alright guys, this is the fourth video into the series of what I would do if I made a movie for so on and whoever. Since this does seem to be a series I'm continuing, I'm actually going to make a playlist so you can check out all the other videos I've done so far if you have not seen it yet. Now this is going to be a World's Finest movie, a Batman and Superman movie, and it's going to be very similar to my Batman video I made. It is an idea I have that would make an interesting movie, but at the end of the day, this is not my definitive idea. I actually have a lot of ideas for how a World's Finest film could work out. And the one story I do have that I would really love to tell, I would love to tell it in much more of an epic type of basis. So I'm going to hold on to that story and maybe at a later date or sometime in the future, I'll share it. But for the idea I have now, it still works pretty well. So where we last left Superman and Batman, Superman fought Metallo and learned of his weakness to kryptonite, and still defeated Metallo in the end. Batman defeated Black Mask and the Joker, did not capture the Joker, and also found out that Black Mask was getting a lot of his funding from LexCorp. Now, due to the destruction in Metropolis that Lex is trying to clean up, and he's also trying to make Superman look like a bad guy, Bruce has joined Wayne Enterprises with LexCorp to help him clean up and rebuild the pieces and parts of Metropolis that have been decimated. And certainly parts of that city have suffered even more from Superman's battle with Metallo. So firstly, with Superman's side of things, this is how it would work. Lex Luthor would review the fight between Superman and Metallo. Almost like a coach for a sports team, he's re-watching tape to study his enemy to figure out how to actually stop this guy. He's watching things from CCTV cameras, from news stations and helicopters floating above the fight that was happening. He is watching this fight over and over again any way he can. Lex Luthor obviously has a huge amount of kryptonite and knows now that kryptonite is of course his true weakness, but Superman still beat Metallo. So how does he make it more effective? Well, however the fight ends between Superman and Metallo, I'm just gonna throw a what if to you here. Let's just say it ended this way. Superman is of course weakened and very hurt by the kryptonite, but in the final battle, Superman grows this great amount of desperation and willpower. He stands up, he flies over to Metallo, he starts peeling his chest open and zapping the kryptonite with heat ray, hoping that the more energy the kryptonite takes from his heat ray, it'll eventually crack and break, depleting Metallo's power. Well, something Lex Luthor wasn't noticing before, but is noticing now, Superman's heat ray hitting the kryptonite stone is actually overheating it to an extent where kryptonite is not a weakness to Clark anymore. It is actually an overly dangerous strength of his. Superman's heat ray used in the right situation is just as hot as the sun, and with that pouring down on kryptonite, not just from afar, but point blank range, if this is the kryptonite and I'm Superman, this thing's getting just as hot as the sun, and it's overpowering Superman. As if Superman wasn't already powerful before, the kryptonite is now overcharged into giving him even more strength. But the bad thing about it is that Superman, when that happens to him, is no longer in control of his abilities. His body, his blood, his veins are just shooting up with so much solar kryptonite energy that Clark literally cannot keep himself contained and he cannot control his powers. And that is in the end how he overpowered Metallo and beat him even with kryptonite. Lex would obviously love to kill Superman, or at the very least be able to put a boot on his throat and be able to say, I defeated Superman. But Lex Luthor also has no problem with ruining the public image of Superman in hoping that the world does turn against him, considering we live in societies where if you see anything on social media or news outlets, it's automatically believed. After studying Superman for so long, Lex Luthor knows Superman has some very romantic connection to Lois Lane. With Superman's super hearing, Lex Luthor tricks Superman into hearing cries and screams for help from Lois Lane, bringing him to this weirdly empty Metropolis street. No one's really around, buildings kind of look empty, no Lois Lane, something is very off, and Superman is wondering what the hell is going on. Sparing some details here, but around this empty street and city buildings, Lex Luthor plants multiple superheated kryptonite rocks where Superman can't see them in plain sight, and already the superheat is now attracting and affecting Superman, and he is losing control. He cannot control the heat ray, he can't control his anger and his strength, and all of a sudden he just lets loose straight from his eyes, sawing down this city street building and absolutely destroying everything in sight. It's almost like Cyclops. When Cyclops takes off his visor or his mask or whatever he's wearing, if he keeps his eyes open, the lasers are going to constantly shoot out of his eyes. Until he closes them, there's no stopping it. It is uncontrollable on Superman's part, and it is actually painful for him as well. So now with the media trying to scare people into making them think that Superman is a bad guy who is unhinged and uncontrollable and only does what he wants, Superman simply can't win and does not know what he should do. Lex Luthor, on the other hand, it doesn't matter to him. He either gets kryptonite to weaken him so he can kill him, or he overcharges the kryptonite where it makes Superman absolutely uncontrollable, so he looks terrible to the eyes of the world. Now, for Batman's side, he's been quite busy. He's been operating a lot in Gotham City and a lot in Metropolis, trying to figure out where all this money was coming from and why Lex was giving Black Mask the money in the first place. Well, as we know, Black Mask is a businessman, and it turns out he was actually transporting a big amount of kryptonite to Lex Luthor. And now Bruce Wayne knows that Lex Luthor is keeping a ton of kryptonite locked away in his facilities in Metropolis. Let's not pretend, though, that Batman is in Metropolis just to figure out what Lex Luthor had to do with Black Mask. He is also very interested in the Superman figure and needs to know if we can trust him. Batman is a very, 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 very intelligent man, so he's not going to go off and judge Superman as being someone who's evil. He's seen enough of his actions, whether it be media or any type of research of his own, to know that Superman is not inherently a bad guy. But for Batman just to ignore his instincts and think Superman will never be a threat, that's not how Batman operates. Learning that Lex Luthor's lies goes really deep, and knowing his hatred for Superman has gone very far, realizing what kryptonite does, Batman does break into LexCorp and steals some kryptonite for himself as a contingency plan, just in case he ever needs to use it against Superman. Do we all remember that scene in Batman vs. Superman where Lex goes back to his building and sees the footage of Batman in his building stealing his kryptonite? Well, we would get that in this movie, and we would get it fully fleshed, completely detailed. I'm talking like a 5 to 7 minute scene of Batman walking into LexCorp and completely decimating his professionally well-armed henchmen and guards, getting around his top of the top security systems, and just causing complete havoc in his facility. So after doing this, Lex Luthor is now on edge. Yes, he's winning the war against Superman currently, but now he's got to deal with Batman. And it's not like Superman is completely dealt with, because Lex knows at any moment it could backfire at him. He now needs to figure out, how do I deal with Superman and Batman, and why in the world is Batman even here in the first place? And there you go. It does not take long for a 10th level intellect to instantly put the pieces together. Bruce Wayne has come to Metropolis to help me, a billionaire, whereas Batman is in Metropolis stealing from me, who uses gadgets that could only be funded by a billionaire. It has to be Bruce Wayne. So making his way back to his scenic view office to devise a plan on how to take out Batman now, he is greeted by one of the most psychopathic gifts you could ever receive. Sitting in his office chair, spinning around very slowly, and laughing is the Joker. This is where I take a little bit of inspiration from the Batman and Superman animated movie where they have to take on both of their arch enemies. Lex would obviously know of this Joker person. He's seen things about him on the news. He's heard of his antics from a couple of weeks ago with the Batman, where Joker essentially says that he's made it a point in his life he will make sure he is where Batman is at all times. Lex Luthor being desperate on defeating both of these heroes, and Joker obviously doing it because it's fun and having his own end goal, they join forces to take down Batman and Superman. So back to Batman and Superman, their very first meetup. I would take it a bit from the cartoon, but I would add a little bit more. Miles away from Clark Kent's apartment, Batman is perched on the side of a building, spying on him through binoculars, obviously knowing that is Superman, trying to learn any bit of ounce of information he can before they finally meet. Clark Kent in his apartment watching the news, not understanding why Lex is always one step ahead of him and feeling a little bit depressed, looks over to the side and notices miles in the distance Batman spying on him. Batman gets a little surprised, drops the binoculars, then puts them back up to look back at him, and Clark Kent is no longer there. He drops them and is now shocked, like what in the world just happened in the matter of 0.2 seconds. And all of a sudden, right behind him is Clark Kent, arms crossed, floating above him, and he says, "What do you want? Why are you spying on me?" This is the first meetup between Batman and Superman where they have a somewhat friendly discussion. It's not overly joyous, but it's not the worst in the world. But just to see for himself, pulling out from the many cases in his utility belt, Batman throws a small piece of kryptonite in front of Superman, where Superman starts to weaken, drops from his floating state, and is clearly in discomfort. Batman now starts to question that kryptonite makes him weak, but the other day when Lex Luthor used it against him to go rageful, he was still using kryptonite. How is this possible? And because Batman does not view Superman as his enemy yet, or not a full enemy at the very least, they decide to join forces to find out what Lex Luthor is truly up to see if they can finally put him behind bars. Now, on the other side of things, Lex of course needs to stop Batman because he could interfere with a lot of business moves, but he needs to stop Superman because he does not want to be beat by someone that he thinks he's better than. Whereas with the Joker, he realizes that this is just fun. I can mess with Batman, my new best friend. But imagine what I could do with someone like Superman if I got a hold of this kryptonite thing. So of course we would see Batman, Superman, Joker, and Luthor all in one room together. But what I would do is I would actually switch the enemies. And I'm not exactly sure right now how we would handle this third act, what the fighting would be like, what they would be fighting against. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, maybe Lex Luthor has made a bunch of Metallo minions that doesn't have any human parts. They're just robots. They all have the kryptonite chess pieces, and Batman needs to fight those to get to Luthor. I don't know, just an idea. Not my favorite idea in the world, but it's something. With Joker, it obviously cannot be a straight up fist fight because that's impossible. But what would happen is he would now gain the knowledge from Lex that Superman loves Lois Lane. This time Lois would actually get kidnapped, and Joker would do something very vile. He would pin some sort of ankle or wrist bomb on Lois that if she tried to remove herself, it would blow up on contact. Superman, if he gets too close to her, has a radius meter where it blows up as well. So Superman now needs to find a way to get to Lois Lane without her dying and without Joker having a reason to press the trigger himself. So, sparing many details, in the end, Batman and Superman would come out victorious. Taking on each other's enemies as well would help Batman submerge himself into Superman's world to realize what he has to go through, and same thing for Superman and Batman's world. They can now connect to one another on another level, like friends and like brothers. Obviously, the end of this movie would have Superman saying, "We work well together, we should do this more often," and Batman essentially says, "I'm sure I'll see you around, but I like to work on my own," and he disappears so quick that Superman doesn't even see him go. That's it for the film itself, but with the release of a World's Finest film, you could imagine we are vastly approaching a Justice League film. In this movie, there would be a lot of Easter eggs that point towards future characters like Flash or Green Lantern. One of these next videos I work on is actually going to be Green Lantern related, and in this film I would have a reference to Green Lantern. When Batman infiltrates LexCorp, you can hear two security guards before Batman starts the fighting talking about, "Did you hear what happened at Ferris Fields a couple days ago?" And what is it that happened? Well, wait for my next video to find out. Someone in the film could be scrolling on social media on their computer, and they maybe see some sort of article that says weird red blurs of light in Central City. And I'm sure there could be many more where that came from. If my movies did have end credit scenes, or if I could simply just fit it in at the end of these movies, it would 100% be Wonder Woman meeting up with Batman or with Superman, or potentially both. And it would actually be Wonder Woman asking for their help. It would have to do with what happened at the end of my Wonder Woman idea there, where it involves Cersei and possibly even Ares. So there you go. That is one of my many ideas for a World's Finest film. My completely real World's Finest idea, I will save, like I said, for hopefully a future date where I can tell it a little more epically, but this is a story that I think could work as well. So guys, as per usual, let me know what you think in the comments below, and let me know what you would like to see in a World's Finest movie. But that is it for this one, everyone. So until next time, I'll talk to you all very soon.